Europe is on the verge of launching its largest military buildup in decades.
Europe, therefore, needs to fortify its security architecture. And we don't have much time to get this right. We only have...
That's the Dutch defense minister speaking at the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum. Over the last few months, countries like Germany, the UK, Poland, Denmark have announced big defense spending plans to counter concerns about Russian expansion. This follows warnings from the White House that Europe must defend its own security and can no longer rely on the U.S. For more on Europe's defense plans, we are joined this morning by Alexander Lenoshka, Associate Professor of International Relations at the University of Waterloo. Good morning.
Good morning to you, too. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on. So European leaders have known for years they need to boost defense spending. Some analysts say they've been too slow. How much of this is due to the geopolitical shift we've seen between the U.S. and Russia?
Well, I would probably argue that we should not overstate current developments as being that impactful. We have to bear in mind that the European defense community has been taking Russia seriously for at least several years, since 2022. One can argue we can go back even further to 2014. And indeed, since 2014, a number of countries, especially those located closest to Russia, have already increased their defense expenditures by maybe 100%, 150%. Some even as much as 200%. So there has been this long-term trend, as it were, towards greater defense spending, the recapitalization of armed forces, as well as the consideration of new defense strategies in view of what has been going on between Russia and Ukraine for quite some time already.
It was interesting to hear, we played the clip in the intro there, that the Dutch defense minister was really talking about the urgency of this. I mean, what sort of timeline do you think he was talking about?
Well, a number of countries have already figured that they need to boost up their military expenditures and thus increase their combat readiness within a 5-year time period. There's a sense that Russia does have the capability of reconstituting its military forces. However, much attrition they have suffered over the course of the last several years in Ukraine. But we have to bear in mind, too, that Europe is a slow creature. It's very bureaucratic. There requires a lot of coordination, especially when it comes to joint projects, of which there are not that many within European context. And so, if anything, what I would say is that the arrival or re-arrival of Donald Trump to the White House has provided new stimulus to get serious about defense in a way that may have been not the case only a year or two ago.
Greater defense costs money. What are the financial risks and benefits that come with this kind of spending?
Well, so far, European governments have been willing to increase defense spending. There is variation across the continent as to how they're going about defense financing. You have some countries like Estonia and Latvia introduce temporary taxes. Those taxes have a lot of social buy-in because society is aware of the threat. Poland is going about deficit financing. They're essentially accruing debt. Again, there's support. But even so, the sustainability over the medium to long term of these defense investments remains open to question. There are certain guns versus butter trade-offs. European economies generally are not that fast growing anymore, with some exceptions, Poland being one. And so there is indeed that concern that the militaries can receive the funding right now, but will they receive that funding in several years? We don't know. And unfortunately, military power takes time to generate.
You mentioned Poland. Poland announcing it will enforce military training for all men. The country says it hopes to grow its military from 200,000 people to 500,000 by the year 2027. Do you think more countries will do that?
Well, it's not clear if Poland will actually realize those numbers. The previous Polish government, in fact, trotted out similar numbers, maybe 300,000, and many people, in fact, did not take those seriously. It's expensive to have military personnel. Countries definitely are following in line with what Poland is doing, perhaps not to the same extent, but there's definitely much more consideration about the need to overcome personnel shortages, what we have in Canada for that matter, across the continent, precisely because of the threat that they see coming from the Russian Federation, as well as the very fickleness of the United States under its current leadership.
Ukraine ceasefire talks are happening. Most European countries are in favor of continuing to support Ukraine, but without U.S. support, how much defense can Europe offer Ukraine in the long term?
That's the big question. Ukraine has been fairly adept in trying to develop its own defense industry since 2022. It's providing about 30 or 40% of its own needs. The United States, however, provides about 30-40%, and Europe provides the rest. Europe can perhaps shore up what might be lacking from the United States, although U.S. has resumed some of its aid. But again, there are just some capabilities that Europe will not be able to field. The United States, for example, has a lot of space assets, all this satellite technology, intelligence, surveillance, and so forth. Europe cannot provide that so easily. So there will be certain capability shortfalls that Europe will have to address. But again, it will take time to do so, and that will have implications for support for Ukraine.
Alexander Lenoshka, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.